A wonderful hello to everybody to this panel on the afternoon of the second day of this wonderful conference, Young People, Migration and the Demographic Challenges in the Western Balkans. I'm really happy to be the moderator of this panel on domestic reforms, part one, towards a better image of skills and labor market. A warm welcome also goes to my panelists, Ivana Aleksić in Belgrade, Barbara Gerber in Vilsbiburg, Nora Hasani in Prishtina, Boris Jokić in Zagreb, Françeska Muço in Tirana. So we have 5 panelists, and my thanks goes also to the organizers of this very important conference, which is I think timely, even though we have a specific situation when it comes to the corona pandemic. But nevertheless, we have to talk about the future, and we have to talk about these topics as match of skills and labor market needs and demands when it comes to the young generation. Just to set a frame maybe for this panel, we have heard already yesterday a lot of the question, or that it's important to talk about education, about the systems, educational systems in the region, about the needs or the question which skills are needed and so on. And we have a specific situation when it comes to the region that we talk about high unemployment rates and specifically when it comes to the youth. But at the same time, we have comments from the business side that there's also a lack of skilled workforce. So of course, one part is that, and we are talking about this topic of migration and why young people leaving the region, but there's a second point which we will discuss here in this panel about the demands of the labor market and the skills given by the given educational systems. So I would like to hand over directly to my first panelists. Or no, before I do this, maybe just I would like to quote or give one figure when it comes to the question how companies in the region are see the situation, whether skills of young people match to the needs they have with their companies. And there are the latest figures of the Balkan Business Barometer. And only for Serbia, we have a figure which is by 58% that companies say, yes, the skills the young people have are matching with our needs. The most worst figure, I would say, comes from Bosnia and Herzegovina, where 24 or 28% just agree that these skills are matching the needs of their companies, but 24% fully disagree. So obviously we don't have to talk about the question whether this is the right or whether this thesis is the right one, that skills are not matching, but how can we achieve a better communication maybe among these specific and different systems. So without any ado, I would like to give the floor to Ivana Aleksić, who is Senior Education Consultant wider Europe with the British Council in Belgrade and is an expert on our topic. And Ivana, I would like to ask you the following question. Being an expert on Serbia's education policy, I would like to ask you to share with us your assessment about the current situation in the region and what are the problems young graduates in the region are facing when trying to find a job, and why do they feel they have to move abroad?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. I am quite pleased, and I have to say also excited to be a part of this distinguished panel. And I mean, we have been listening a lot of very good discussions starting from last night and earlier this morning. We have covered it all. At least this is how I feel. So instead of going over a set of specific points which I have already outlined in the background paper, which was prepared for this conference, I decided to reframe my approach, and I'm going to talk about 2 points. One is basically a statement that recognizes that youth of the Western Balkans today, or young adults of the Western Balkans, represent one of the largest marginalized groups. The second point I want to say, or I want to discuss, is that youth are not a homogeneous group. This has very important implications to how we are going to be addressing this problem. So going to the first point, youth in the Western Balkans, and I think that's been clearly illustrated by a number of different examples, personal stories coming from the young people who took part in the conference, as well as numerous experts and representatives of international organizations. Youth are faced with different exclusionary pressures. Those come both from the education, but also from the labor market side. So let me just give you one example how this exclusionary pressure functions within the education. We haven't really spoken much about education inequalities, and what that means in a life of an individual young person is that as they move forward to the next level of education, the private cost of education increases. That virtually translates in the young people's inability to enter, for instance, higher education programs or institutions, and signifies that societies are not staying open or not investing enough to let all young generations to get the required or desired education level degrees. What does that mean in employment? If we dissect the issue of barriers to entry to the labor market and we look at specifics, we can see that the things are really not the same in public versus private sector. In public sector, we know that there's a lot of nepotism. Young people talk about needing to have personal connections in order to access those kind of jobs, which are, as we heard, way more desirable because they're stable, they bring secure monthly salaries. But in private sector, young people get discouraged because they become aware that they're not qualified enough, that they miss skills. And I think one of the first young persons talking last night within one of the videos said that she realized that she needs more education because she couldn't keep up with the requirements of the private sector. Why is this happening? It's happening because we have all recognized that there's a lack of practical experience, or more precisely, there's a lack of opportunities for young people to acquire practical skills. Education in the Western Balkans, by and large, takes place in isolated education facilities. Things have been changing. There's a lot of effort to introduce schemes to allow work-based training and similar things, particularly in vocational education and training reforms. However, we need to think about other young people, about internship and traineeship opportunities, which are not yet there. All of this then translates in a very traumatic transition for youth from school to work. And we can talk about that because the long-term unemployment of the young people is really a cause of concern. The end result is what we have been discussing. It's a very high youth unemployment rate for young people, which is on average at least 2 times higher than the overall unemployment rate in the Western Balkan countries. The second point, I'll be much shorter. Youth, as I said, are not homogeneous group. So, if we talk, for instance, of condition of young people who have graduated from secondary schools, that's going to be very different from the situation of young people who have completed higher education. But even more importantly, we haven't been using sufficient policy instruments to support learning and labor market inclusion of those young people who belong to truly vulnerable groups. Those include young women, those include Roma youth, those include youth with disabilities. There are other, but let's focus on these. Even though the Western Balkan states do have, by and large, anti-discrimination laws, this hasn't been really fully implemented. And then the end result of this is that the rates of those young people who are not in education, not in employment, or not in training are much higher, 2 times higher for these young people than for the overall young. So I'll stop here. This is just by way of introduction.
Thank you very much, Ivana, for these insights and for also bringing up the topic that especially within the youth, we have a specific group of young people which are even worse integrated when we talk about integration into the labor markets than the youth as itself. And I would like also to give, or just to ask Françeska later on in her statement also to comment on these topics, especially maybe if there are any ideas how to deal with these heterogeneous groups. And but before I ask later on also Françeska to comment on these topics, I would like to include a technical note. I forgot to ask all of the participants in the audience. You can use the question and answer function to ask questions and to the panelists. And after the first round of introductory statements of the panelists, we will open the floor for these questions. And my wonderful co-moderator, Christian, will then pick up the questions from the question and answer function, and we will give it to our panelists. And the second one, and that's why I had to make this sign to Ivana, is that we have asked our panelists to stick to the 5 minutes for their first statement, as we would like to answer as much as possible questions. And so I leave the field of technical remarks, and I would like to introduce Ms. Gerber, who is head of global professional education with Dräxlmaier Group in Vilsbiburg. And this is really, we are really happy to have you here, because that is really something we cannot talk about education and the match of skills and labor market needs without having a representative of a company which is producing in the region. And you are at Dräxlmaier in charge for building up professional education departments all over the world. At the moment, Dräxlmaier employs, as you mentioned, around about 1,300 apprentices in more than 30 plants. When it comes to the region, we can say there is a production site in North Macedonia and Kavadaci, and if I'm not wrong, which was established in 2012, and employees, as I have heard, about 5,000. Maybe you can just.
Yeah.
That's the right figure. Okay.
That's the right figure.
Perfect. And so obviously you are really the right person to give us an insight about the current situation. And so my question to you was that there's a guiding question of the panel, that how to better match the skills of labor market and demand, and how to improve young people's labor market integration. I would like to ask you to set the frame from a company's perspective, how Dräxlmaier assesses the situation, especially in the region. What needs to be done to improve the situation by the governments? Because one side is that companies can do a lot of things and a lot of projects, but there's also most probably a need for new regulations, for instance. And what can the business community do to hand in ideas and support the governmental reforms? Maybe you can give us some insights about your experiences to introduce vocational training in North Macedonia as well. So it's quite a set of questions, but I hope, or I'm looking forward to your introduction and remarks on these questions. Thank you.
Okay, so as I understood, I only have 5 minutes for the whole sentence, right?
Yes.
I prepared much
maybe
too
we
much.
Can split a bit.
Yeah, maybe. So I have to make it very short. I really prepared myself very well, but now I see I worked too much on it. First of all, I was surprised when you told me how much in some countries that the company thinks the young people are in the right way educated for the needs of the companies. I am around the world. And excuse me when I'm sometimes quite frank, and open, but I don't want to insult anybody. What I realized around the world is that a lot of companies think they are on a very good way, but believe me, they are not. So if I compare, what does a company need? And I stay mostly to the vocational education. What I realize is that the need, however it is, the condensed hardly compares the need of the company. For example, if you think if you ask companies, let's get going next month. If you ask companies and ask them what they need, it depends what kind of company do you ask. For example, if you ask a small company, a local company, which is not in technology, in high technology, they are always satisfied. Sorry when I say it. But if you ask a company who goes on automatization system, on digitalization, on robotic and things like this, yes, the engineers are quite qualified in a very good way and very high well. But you also need professional workers, qualified workers. And actually, that's a need what we are missing. That's why we are doing. We spend a lot of effort and money to build up professional education, not like the Germans do it, but we want to reach the level of the German professional education, which is called dual system. So that's why we are in the countries. That's actually why we are in Macedonian. We started in Macedonian years ago, professional education, and it was actually quite easy for us because we were the only company at that time who started it. And we worked very close together with the AHK, the city hall, the school, and the government. And what we realized we have to start early because our companies are changing very fast. When I started 7 years ago, working with Dräxlmaier, our plants they did harness for the car. So we had a lot of handwork. But if you go now in our company, we have big machines, we have robotic system, automatization. So we, as I said, engineers not the problem, but the workers, the maintenance people, the application technicians, they don't have the professionally what we need. And that's actually what we realized in Macedonian. And that's the reason why we started to build up a professional education together with the school. And we are at the beginning, not in the middle and not in the end. And as I said, the complexity of the technology is changing very, very fast. Very, very fast. The increase of mechanics and network of process. It's amazing what the young people have to learn to do. And if you go on the matching, it actually can maybe match for a small company, which is years behind the technology, but not at a company who has a high technology. The matching doesn't work. That's actually why we are working in it. Maybe it seems unpolite, but that's how it is. And I still have to say we are on a very good way, but it takes, I'm sure, years to reach the needs of the companies who are working in a high technology area. And I know, I listen to other panels, I know if you qualify the people, maybe some people or a lot of people will leave the country. That's a problem, what I realize. And that's actually always what people tell me. Oh, if we qualify, then they will leave our company and maybe they will also leave the country. Yeah, that's a problem. But still, you have to qualify the people to get companies to come companies in the country and to hold the companies in the country. That's actually my area. And that's, I'm quite lucky because my profession is, as you already said, my work is to build up professional education around the world. So what else can I tell you?
Thank you so much for this intervention. And so maybe, but just one remark, as you mentioned, and as we mentioned, you're in charge for building up those kind of professional education structures all over the world. Do you see a specific advantage when it comes to the Western Balkans? Do you see, so now you have the plant in North Macedonia, but is there any idea of Dräxlmaier also to talk about regionalization of and cooperation maybe with other companies to support those structures, just as a question? As we talk about regional integration all the whole time, maybe that would be.
Yeah. Actually, we do it. Maybe to get to know, we are building a professional education next in Poland. We have 5 plants in Romania where we have it already, Moldavia and Macedonia. So as a company, we are actually work very close together. All our training departments are working around the world together. So that's one point. And what we also do, like in Romania, we are working together very, very close with Continental, with Scheffler, with Hella, with Marquardt. We even work with Gerber very close together to build up a professional system in the company. And to make it clear, we don't want to take the German system and put it on a local system. That's not the idea behind it. The idea is matching the both systems, see what's good in one side and the other side, and put it together, always with the government. So also what we do in Macedonia, we also work together with companies. So we share our knowledge. We show what we do. Like if you want to build up a school, a workshop area, it's a school, we give all our knowledge away. You know, I make the layout, the technical layout. I even show them what material they could use. I only propose it, but we work very, very close to with other companies, and we are open. And why do we do it? Because if we find a lot of shareholders, a lot of companies who work together, it's easier for the government to build up a system like this. And of course, it makes it much easier if we find local companies to work with us together. But it's not easy because professional education, it's very, very expensive for a company. Like we do it at the moment. So only to give you an example, I have a fully equipped workshop area in Macedonian. We have 2 trainers in Macedonian. So we have around about 60, 70 young people in Macedonian in this field. So you have to pay the young people. We pay them always salary. It doesn't matter if we have to do or not. So we need 2 trainers, and we have to educate our trainers. So we invite them to Germany, or we come to Macedonian, and we also give a lot of material to the school, because we have to help the school to improve their own workshop areas. So that makes professional education sometimes not very interesting for local companies, because local companies are not used to spend a lot of money. So in Germany, it's over 100 years old. So it's quite easy to do it. But to make it short, it's very important that you work together with other companies on a long distance, because if you have it as a government system, a public system, that makes life easier. And we also want to train the people with a degree, so an official degree, to go on to improve their knowledge and their life.
Thank you so much for these insights, Mrs. Gerber. And I think that's important also to make this topic that there is an investment in the future of these young people by giving professional education, despite the fact that, again, also your company obviously has to deal with the issues as leaving the company and leaving the country. So again, also for you and for the businesses, it's important to discuss and to get more insights about what are the reasons for leaving, when people will come back and whatever. So again, this is something I would say, I would like to highlight that obviously there's a dialogue, a constant dialogue needed among all stakeholders, including the businesses and the CSOs and the governments about this topic, not just about education and how to match, and you mentioned this as well, that there are different layers, but also about the question how we can keep the young people in their home countries. Saying this, I would like to go to our next panelist, but before I give Nora the floor, we will play a video, right? So I would like the techniques to start the video.
Guten Tag, Verena, mein Name. Was kann ich für Sie tun?
Okay, ja, das weiß was ich eigentlich nicht. Es ist so, dass es die anderen zwei sind.
Për mua është një ndjenjë shumë e mirë me punu gjermanisht për Gjermaninë në Kosovë. Madje kemi edhe shumë punëtorë të cilët janë kthy prej Gjermanisë për me punu në Kosovë, pasi që kushtet e punës dhe ambienti i punës është i njëjtë.
Wir arbeiten mit vielen deutsch sprechenden Mitarbeitern, wir haben aber auch weitere internationale Unternehmen, auch viele anderssprachige Mitarbeiter, die gutes Kundenservice leisten. Das ist im Vergleich, wenn wir einen Benchmark ziehen, in Europa ist Kosovo aktuell der place to be. Unser Ziel, nachhaltig Arbeitsplätze zu sichern, aufzubauen, und Potenzial ist mehr als nur vorhanden.
Pasi që gjuha gjermane ka arritur në një nivel të lartë të vlerësimit në Kosovë dhe sipas përvojës me 4 vjeçare në këtë firmë, në këtë kompani, e përjashtoi mundësinë e emigrimit jashtë vendit.
Yeah. So this was one of the videos which was also produced by Deutsche Welle specifically for this conference. And Nora, you are as the managing director of the German-Kosovar Business Association, the one representing actually you are the first source of information, I would say, when it comes to Kosovo's labor market. And since 2017, I would like to add, you are the managing director of this association, and you have a long tradition of cooperating with Germany in different positions. And I would like to ask you, from all Western Balkan countries, Kosovo's youth unemployment rate is one of the highest, and it was mentioned here in the video as well. And what is the feedback of companies investing and engaging in Kosovo about the labor market? What can you tell us about the skills which are available in the country, and where do the companies see a need of skilled workforce, in which areas, and where they see also the needs for more ambitions and moves from the government sides? Are there projects already implemented also to train young people? So I have in mind projects financed and supported by the GIZ, but maybe you can give us more insights about this. And maybe you can also comment on the video we have just seen. Maybe Weblink Kosovo, just to mention, this is one of the bigger investments also of a German company, which is already present in 5 regions, as I know, with 1,000 employees. So obviously it's a big, big institution or big company. So Nora, the floor is yours. 5 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll try. There are many questions, so it's quite challenging. Yeah, the video was quite impressive, right? They have the motto "Work German and live in Kosovo." As you've seen, we have a very young population. 70% are under 35 years old, and our demographic structure is never a problem when it comes to workforce. So many people are well educated, speak different languages, and most probably you don't know this, but the highest concentration of German speakers per capita outside Germany, Austria, and Switzerland is Kosovo. So these are the reasons why many investors are attracted to invest in call centers and customer support centers, as we've seen in the video. We have web help, Speaks, Teleperformance, Sutherland offering really services to well-known international clients, and they have established trust, even though their clients know and are aware that the services are coming from Kosovo. So this means that we offer high quality services, and we obviously have people to do that. But there are also local companies that provide customer support services and business process outsourcing services in very specific fields, such as e-procurement and so on. And yeah, these are not only call center related tasks, but really more complicated tasks. And we have also a very high and fast growing IT sector who are exporting services not only to the EU, but also to the US market. And having all this in mind, all this information sounds very promising, right? But what we saw in the video, it's just a success story of a very specific sector. So there in this sector, we have very good employers. They are offering competitive salaries, and they're really working closely with the people in order to refine their already existing skills. And I have to admit that this is quite an exception for Kosovo yet. So Kosovo's economy should not attract only investors in call centers. We know that this is very unreliable as a concept. There's a lot of potential out there in other sectors as well. And the reality in those sectors, when it comes to the gap, what the workforce is offering and what the labor market needs, is totally different. We have many young people, and it's really shocking that this unemployment rate for youth is very high, over 50%. We have, in general, a problem with unemployment in Kosovo. Less than 1/3 of the adult population has a job, and almost 9 out of 10 women are not working. So let that sink in. So you see, we have a very high youth and women unemployment rate, which is among the highest worldwide. And then we come to this very absurd thing. So there are obviously companies searching and seeking to find the right people. And then on the other hand, we have all these young people who are unemployed. So should it not be really easy to connect them both and to find a solution for these problems? But it's not that easy. In the past 3 years, I had at least 400 meetings with business representatives, and they always complain that when it comes to recruiting, it's difficult to find people because they're lacking experience or they are not having the right skill sets. So that is a problem if you analyze all these discussions and if you analyze the diverse reports that are written by the World Bank, UNDP, local and international think tanks, we come to just one conclusion. There are 3 different stakeholders or pillars, if I might call them, and they don't have the right framework to interact with each other. And I'm talking here about the private sector, the employers, the companies, and then we have the youth as potential employees, and then the training and education providing centers. There is rarely a dialogue between them. So sometimes, and I don't want to sound very pessimistic here, I tend to think that we're living in parallel universes. Companies are not well connected with the education and training system in Kosovo. They're not well informed about what's out there. So what are the offers that vocational education training centers and schools are offering? And when they recruit, they don't even know what's out there because they rely on informal networks. So they rely on recommendations from their personal networks. And this is very challenging then, on the other hand, right, for the youth get and see those vacancies. And I mean, this topic is very broad. I don't know if I can wrap it up in 5 minutes. I know that we will talk about this later on, but it is clearly this problem that there needs to be a better communication, a better dialogue, and we need to have a framework that encourages this cooperation between all these 3 pillars. So it was mentioned before, the education system in each of our country is weak. We don't have good. Serbia has started to implement a law which has elements of the German dual system, but in most of the countries we really have like a classic old system in place, where it was even mentioned in the panel before, pupils are forced to learn by heart and to and not to have this practical approach of problem solving, teamwork, communication, and soft skills that are needed from the companies. And when it comes to vocational education schools, I think they need they need to connect with businesses more in order to have the right curriculars to offer the programs that are needed and linked to the labor market needs. And there's no practical approach. And I will give you just one short example without exceeding my time. In one of the reports, and it's the skill assessment reports from the UNDP, it's mentioned that for the wood processing sector, there are 2 vocational schools in Kosovo and 5 vocational education training centers. And they are not even located in the regions where wood processing firms are located. So you see, with this very short example, we can illustrate that even this is not working. I mean, there are some approaches and there are really good projects, especially by the GIZ, who have started to work on both sides with the Ministry of Education, with the professional education training centers, but also with businesses to implement in the job training. But these projects and programs that we have in our donor base, they are still on a small scale. We need to have this Kosovo-wide, and we need to have a reformed system. And when it comes to youth, well,
last remark.
Last remark. The last remark is my 3rd pillar. So you see that they're lacking even information. We don't have a systematic attempt to measure skills and demands, and our youth is forced. There's this big pressure from the society to have a university degree, and university degrees in law and in all these social sciences, whereas the private sector, they need people who are in mechatronics. They need people who can work different things in regard to manufacturing, to operate machines. And so there's a huge mismatch, but it's not only because of the educational system, but also because of the lack of information and the communication between all 3 of them. And I will stop here and continue later on.
Thank you so much, Nora, especially for taking up also the point that obviously there's much more dialogue among the stakeholders needed. Maybe we can take this as one of the takeaways of this conference, and maybe we can leave it also to the governments that we would like to see more interaction among these stakeholders. And also thanks for also picking up the topic again. We're talking about the question of how to get a job. Do we need informal structures to get one or not? And the topic of the lack of data. And as I remember it rightly, Ivana, it's also one of your points in your background paper that there's obviously a lack of data about the skills needed, and yeah. So the substance actually is lacking to really get ideas on how to frame the reforms. But I would like, before we discuss all these topics in depth, I would like also to give the floor to Boris. And actually, if we talk about reforms, you are one person representing like no other this topic. And so first, your current position is that you are the higher research associate with the Institute for Social Research in Zagreb. But You were one of the creators of the comprehensive curricular reform of early and preschools, elementary and secondary education in Croatia. And as I remember it rightly, there were a lot of protests afterwards, not because you have done a bad job by creating these reforms, but really to pushing the reforms forward and the people supporting you, if I have it right in my mind. So I would like to give the floor to you and asking the question that since 2013, Croatia joined the European Union. This is not really a long time ago, but maybe you can share with us your experience of Croatia's problems before and after joining the European Union in the context of educational reforms, because maybe is it a driving force maybe to implement much better the reforms in the system, or is there, can we see any changes? That would be a question I would have. And what is needed to successfully implement educational reforms? So that would be also one question. And again, 5 minutes. I know that's it's not enough to answer all details, but I'm sure you will make it. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anja, and hello. And it's going to be enough. 5 minutes is more than enough. So sad that we could not meet in Germany. To come to your questions, did EU help, or Croatia's joining EU, did it help reform efforts? I would say in some ways, yes. In some ways, it forced at least some focus on the decision makers to have a strategic way of thinking and to implement some elements of the reform packages. However, there is always a kind of a wrong motivation in Balkans with regards to the reforms and EU. The motivation is such that you fulfill some kind of EU requirements. It shows a lack of self-respect on behalf of these countries. Reforms should be done because of the people within the countries. It should be done because of the young people, if we talk about education and their own future. There was a lot of talk here about what kind of person do we have, or what kind of skills or like competencies portfolio should a young person have. I think that's the wrong way of looking at things. I think that first thing what policymakers should pose in all of these countries, including Croatia, is basically what kind of society do they want with regards to the education. Do they want to be just like montage societies for the developed world, or do they want to be just like the place where people just take people away from and then put them in their own settings? Or there is something more here. Croatia, and I know all of these countries, including Kosovo, Albania, Serbia, Bosnia, Slovenia, Macedonia, Montenegro, to name all of them. If I forgot someone, I'm sorry, but like they are not the like third world or the fourth world countries. They are the countries with a long tradition of education and long tradition of successful education and successful educational systems. However, in the last 30 years, there has been a lack of focus on the education. There has been a lack of focus and realization that the main potential of these countries is not a coal anymore, or is not the water anymore, or is not the ore anymore, or wood. It's person, young people. And based on that lack of realization, all of the problems follow. If you don't invest in education as a kind of main potential, and if you do not reform it because of the young people and because of its own society, but because of the EU or someone else, then you're in a wrong motivational section. There is a lot of talk here, and I know from the previous years that we talked, like how to match the needs of the economy and the needs of person. The needs of person are equal, they are vital to the needs of economy. If you just look at the economic perspective and take out the humanistic perspective of young person, then we're going to go to the clear cul-de-sac. We're going to be ending up in a street without a way forward. What these countries should actually do is basically they should focus on the like flexible education which kind of gives, as someone was saying before, generic competencies that could be like adaptable to the various changes in the ecological systems of wherever they work. However, in order to do that, there is a lot of thinking and a lot of wisdom needed for this thing to succeed over time. There are several elements which are absolutely necessary for educational reforms. First one is basically that policymakers, and I'm here speaking about the crude politics, like parties, if you want, they should have a long-term perspective in education. However, their perspective is extremely short-term. Their perspective is not anymore even the 4-year perspective. It's often less, a half a mandate or a year. If you don't have a long-term perspective with regards to the educational reforms, then you're going to end up with a lot of political problems with regards to the change of the governments. However, in order to successfully reform education or educational system, you at least need 2 mandates or 10 years or maybe 15 years in order to come to the point where you would have significant changes within the system. However, at the moment, in all of these countries, the political systems are such that they do not function at the level of cooperation, understanding of the core national or international interests with regards to the young people and their own interests. So if you ask me what are the necessary components of the successful educational reforms, these would be clearly a long-term vision, a wisdom, and reliance on practical and scientific advice with regards to carrying on of the reforms. Once again, for all of those who are listening to this, especially young people, these are countries, they are not the backwards of the Europe. They're not the worst there are. They're actually the places of significant historical, sparks. They are places of the significant historical world knowledge. However, if we all leave, if we all just leave and don't come back, there's going to be less of that spark present. So my advice, and I'm ending up my 5 minutes beforehand, is basically that one should also go and get the knowledge, go and get the internship, go and I'm the one who got probably one of the world's best knowledge that could be. I finished my doctoral studies in Cambridge, but there is a lot of space for fight here. A lot of space for fight, not in a pure political terms, but a lot of space for fight for a better future of young people, which actually starts in our countries. And these countries are also the places where these changes, successful changes, could actually happen.
Thank you very much for your intervention, Boris, and especially, again, underlining this topic of a long-term perspective and a long-term vision, which is needed when it comes to the educational reforms, and again, also a cooperative move of the governments, and I would say also towards all the other stakeholders. I would like to give the floor now to Françeska, who is the Secretary General of the Young Professional Network and the Youth Representative of Albania at RYCO, based in Tirana. And Françeska is not our last speaker in this round because it's just the last speaker, but it was not by accident that I took the decision to have Françeska the last speaker, because I would like her to sum up as also or not just sum up, but to give some remarks to the interventions made before and by all our other panelists, and also picking up the question of having in mind your position as a Secretary General of the Young Professional Network of Albania. I would like you to set the frame regarding the guiding question of this panel from the perspective of the young people, and also that's why including also the comments to the panelists we have just heard. Where do you see the reform or the need for reforms to better prepare young people for the labor markets? Because this is also in perspective. It was touched a bit by Nora, and especially it was touched by Nora that there's obviously a lack of information also for the young people. So maybe there's something we can do together. But how also, and that was a discussion I think yesterday, or a comment on that one, how to make the voices much louder from the young people. And so the floor is yours. And
good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be today with you, and I hope that you have enjoyed the conference till now. Let me first share a personal history about my integration within the labor market, that from the experience that I have and from the holding position is a common history of a young person in the Western Balkan. None of my studies, starting from the high school, continuing with a bachelor degree for administration and social policy, and concluding with my master for communication science, has equipped me the necessary infrastructure to facilitate this case. Anyhow,
Françeska, unfortunately, we can't hear you that well. Maybe you can switch off the video, then we can hear you better. Maybe then the connection is better. So
can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's much better. Maybe you can start again. Thank you so much. You were frozen, but now it's much better. You can hear you.
I was talking with a lot of passion and I was frozen. Okay. So let's start again. Good afternoon again to everyone. It's a pleasure to be today with you. Let me first share a personal history about my integration within the labor market that from the experience that I have and the holding position is the common history of a young person in Western Balkan. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we hear you.
So none of my studies, starting from the high school, continuing with the bachelor degree for administration social policy, and concluding with my master for communication science, has equipped me with the necessary infrastructure to facilitate my integration in the labor market, neither with the minimum skills to write a motivation letter. This is an ugly fact, but the needed truth in this case. Anyhow, due to my role as active citizen, I have learned this and much more through people with goodwill and endless participation in education programs, campaigns, training, etc. So there is a cause-consequence connection between the education and the face mismatch of skills of young people in the labor market, and the problem needs to be addressed at its roots. Our education system is still based on traditional methods inherited from the old political system, who prepare students for a labor market and a society that no longer exists. And today it's not enough anymore to ace reading and math. The students should be equipped with the ability to develop critical thinking, to adopt with concept of active citizenship, which will also be noticed in the culture of impunity, but also with skills needed for the challenges of this epoch: world pandemic, fast technological evolution, populism, etc. A part of this necessity was clearly emphasized within the strategy of skills launched from the European Union, but also on the paper that me and other speakers within the other panels has been developed. Meanwhile, as we speak about the needed skills of young people, we also should speak about decent employment, where is needed to strengthen monitoring labor institutions, and the lack of trade unions should be addressed. So young people do not complain about the lack of respecting their labor rights, extended working hours, low salaries, etc. And so we would not have 92% of young people in the southeastern region that are attracted from the public sector, from its job security. But we do not have like people which say that the first reason of migration is the quality of employment. So this situation is a wake-up call for policymakers so that tangible changes can be undertaken. If I am good with the time, I can proceed with the question about the...
You have time, so we can proceed.
Okay. And when about the issue raised from Ivana in her first.
Françeska?
Yes.
Okay, so we hear you. So you wanted to go back to the... Hello?
Yes, I wanted to go back to the, about the first remark of Ivana, about how to deal with the groups of young people marginalized. And I think that there are a lot of action plans about Roma community, youth people, but the problem is in their implementation. From my point of view, the cooperation between the central government and the local governments should be increased by involving as well NGOs that work with specific target groups. So in one hand, we have the policies, and in the other hand, we have the grassroots organization and the local municipalities, the local level that have the necessary information about these young people.
Thank you very much, Françeska, and also for sticking to the time limit. Thank you so much. Before I open the round, the second round, especially for the questions from the audience, I would like to just take up one point which you made, the question of trade unions in the region. And so there would be a good question on this one, because they should be part of the dialogue within among employers, so means businesses, governmental structures, and others. So maybe we can, in the second round, also maybe you as the other panelists can pick up this question too. What role would you see? Because I think it's quite interesting to see the role here the trade unions here have in Germany, as structuring also a dialogue among employees and employers, and indeed kind of a lack of trade unions within the region, as I understand it, or once you see them, there's a question, what role do they play and how many employees do they really represent? So maybe that could be a force supported. So this is a question I would leave also to you for the second round. But now I hand over to my co-moderator to pose the questions from the audience.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anja. Hello also from my side. I have the privilege now to present the questions from the audience, and there has been a debate that was almost as vivid as in our panel today, and questions were mostly focusing on two areas of problems regarding labor market integration. And one aspect of the comments was focusing on the need category that we have discussed already. And the questions were, on the one hand, of course, how do you explain that people are in this category? Why do we see so many people in this category? I remember Nora saying that 90% of all women are not working. We have a lot of Roma who are in this category, and also other groups. And another critical question on this was asking, is this a stigmatization or actually a useful classification? So probably you can also answer on this question. And I think this is basically a question for all people in the panel, because it's applicable to all of your areas. To answer it from a company perspective, so why are these need people not employable easily if you're looking for people to qualify, from the view of education systems to the education experts, and of course also from the perspective of the young, and especially young women, what is the problem of this category in the region. So this is the first part. The second part is, I would call it or summarize it as people excluded for other reasons. And there was one question, and I think it was more or less directed to Françeska, which asked, is there in Albania a real transparent job market for young people? And I would probably frame this question also in a bigger context on an issue we have not touched upon so much so far, which is the politicization of the labor market. So the difficulty of finding a job, we already heard the point of seeking jobs in the public sector, which often require some kind of party alignment. So what is the problem there, and how could we get to a depoliticization of labor markets and making it easier for young people to find jobs there? Finally, there was a third question, and somebody who who raised his hand, but it's down now. But he wrote the question in the chat, and I will just read it out for you. It's also kind of a comment. It says, the vocational schools are focusing to what the EU market is asking mostly, so somehow a lot of youth are attending to the vocational schools, which is perfect, but with a perspective to join the EU labor market afterwards, and not the local labor market. Does the EU or any individual EU country has the intention to develop the labor market also in the Balkan countries? Because if not, that means that the trend of leaving the countries will not change. So this is the comment or opinion of the person from the chat. And this is it for the moment. And I would still encourage people to write us questions or also raise their hands. We can also have in the final round, if Anja allows and if time allows, somebody asking also a question directly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christian, for posing these questions. And indeed, actually, all the questions which were posed are questions to all our panelists. Therefore, I would like to ask you, just in the same order, maybe as we started the first round, to pick up the question. I would like to ask you to pick up the question about the need category, whether it's more stigmatization or it's just a classification. So do we need it, or what do you think? And the last question about the role of the European Union. So maybe some of you can answer the question from the perspective from the region. Should the EU be engaged? And most probably yes, but how? And but also as a question to Dräxlmaier and to the German-Kosovar Business Association, it would be the question, are the companies already engaged? Should be done more by the European Union to support those activities? And the question of the transparent job market and politicization of the job market, I actually would like to leave for the third round, because from my perspective, that would be also a good question to make the shift to the next panel on domestic reforms, part 2. So maybe we can also leave there some answers and remarks for a discussion already in the next panel. So the floor is yours, Ivana, and we would like to hear your comments. And also, yes, please, if you have any comment on the topic on trade unions, I would also really appreciate these comments.
Thank you. Thank you for the question on the categorization. I really didn't expect it, and I'm really happy that we got it. I don't really, I'm not sure I will be able to address it fully, but to me personally, and to me as a professional, this question is a question that I associate closely with the issue of social justice. The reason why I'm saying that this is the framework within which I would look at it is that, yes, this is a question that is closely related to the practice of discrimination and sometimes physical segregation, which is very frequent in case of Roma communities across the Western Balkans. So the different features, different characteristics and abilities of our citizens in the Western Balkans clearly determine their life chances, including access to education, access to labor market. This has to be actively addressed. Currently, it has been addressed, but only at policy level, including legislative. As Françeska was pointing quite perfectly to the point, she was saying, like, yes, this is the issue of political will, and this is the issue of implementation. We live in societies where education systems are highly centralized. As a result, decisions are made in a manner that doesn't include a participatory approach. Neither schools, nor teachers, nor school leaders are there to have their say. So this is something that has to be actively addressed by specific policy measures. And there is a tricky part whether this is only needed as a means of categorization or classification. Once you start talking in different categories, you open the space for discrimination, but at the same time, you open the space to actively intervene in improving specific populations' positions. So on that question, I think I have a very strong view. I don't know if my colleagues on the panel would agree. Am I allowed to share a comment to Barbara's presentation, which I mean, all
Yes.
of the presentations were absolutely fantastic. I recalled a sentence I'm sure you're familiar with, which goes like this: train them and they will leave. Don't train them and they will stay. And it's, you know, it's a dilemma of a company, it's a dilemma of a country. Bottom line is that there is no alternative to investing in education. And maybe I should stop here.
Thank you very much, and it's a perfect handover to Barbara's. And please, your comment. You have to unmute yourself, please. Yes.
Thank you. I know. Do you know the sentence, what is first, the hen or the egg? And actually, that's the problem. We are talking about unemployment. And I think it doesn't matter if you have highly skilled young people in the academic career or in the professional education. For unemployment, it means you need companies, and companies means job. So it doesn't matter how you qualify, as long as you don't have companies, big ones, small ones, foreign ones, local ones. That's first of all. So for me, as I said, hen or egg, to get companies in a country, you need qualified people. And of course, some people are leaving, but I'm sure if I qualify 100 young people as mechatronics, maybe 20, 30, 40% are leaving, but still they stay enough in the country to work together and to improve the country system, the social system. And I have friends in Romania. I have a friend, for example, he is, I'm always impressed when he starts talking. He knows a lot of language. He's a technical person. He is on a high proficiency. He could easily find a job in Germany, in America, or somewhere around the world. But he stays because he wants to build up his own country. And as Boris mentioned, it's a lot of history, but history is something, the future is another thing. And you have to improve professional education. We are very good on academic qualification, but we need professional education to get companies in the countries. And you're talking about the European Union support. I think there is a lot of support from Europe, from the country, but we need companies who see the future in your countries, in the Balkan areas. So who is first, hen or egg?
Yeah, that's it. It's always the question, and finally we have to be optimists, and therefore that's why we are here as a German Eastern Business Association as well, to promote these countries as well as destinations for investments. And indeed, we have to discuss all the questions which were discussed at the beginning of the conference about good governance, about fight against corruption, because finally companies can support the economic development, but they need the politics first to improve the investment climate. And I think that's a strong point you made here as well. And nevertheless, I would give the floor to Boris to comment on these topics. Thank you.
I'll also try to be brief. With regards to the need, there's also another overlooked issue with regards to the Western Balkans countries and their education systems. Most of the countries are actually European champions in fewest number of those who leave school. So if you think about the EU, Slovenia and Croatia are the countries with the least early school leavers. I'm saying that because of the following thing. If you think about like NEET kind of stigma that is being attached to the people, it is there not because of the lack of willingness to participate in education. People participate here in education, and moreover, I would say that the education is one of the familial and societal values of the highest sort in Balkans, and that's so often overlooked by the politicians. They do not understand it. So they have the schools, they have the people that go to schools, they have the people who are kind of doing stuff to keep in the schools. However, what's missing is making these schools and the education in them relevant, interesting, motivating, and in a way that can fulfill this dual role of personal development and employment as such in the future. And if you think about it, I would say that the blame is, if one needs to be blamed, blame is on the political elites within this region over the years. They're the ones who are misinterpreting the situation and misinvesting in the wrong things rather than in the education. And that brings me to the labor market and the issue of intervention into the labor market, and especially intervention by the EU in the labor market. I think that's a really dangerous idea if you think about it. We are coming from the socialist past in a way. The overly country or supra country regulated labor market is, I don't think that's the way to go here. I think there is a much better way to go. It's basically to develop, to societies to develop into both cooperative and competitive societies. No one from outside can solve these issues. All of us have a personal freedom, to go abroad and to fulfill our life dreams and aspirations as much as we want. But with regards to the society and with regards to the countries here, there is a much higher stake, and there is a much higher level of strategic thinking needed for these countries to become and realize their own potential. And I think that, if we speak about labor market here, for me, it's completely understandable that young people are looking for their opportunities, and then they will fulfill them wherever these opportunities are achievable to them. But from the perspective of the country, and speaking now as an intellectual in old way, old kind of way, the one who guards for a public good, I would say that, I agree with Barbara that people should be equipped. Some of them, they leave, but those who stay, and some of those who leave will come back, but those who stay should have the environment that they feel safe, that they feel, in a way that surrounding around them is not blocking them, but allowing them to, to fulfill their own aspirations in the context that they were raised. So I think, I don't think that intervention should be there on any behalf, except the intervention in the educational system with regards to making a higher quality of educational system with a higher equity of the educational system. And I think that's where we, we come back to the issue of needs, and what Ivana said, underprivileged groups who are often overlooked, often stigmatized, and within themselves, they themselves have the potential also of becoming, very constructive parts of the societies and the European Union.
Thank you very much. I would like to give hand over directly to Nora because I saw a lot of yes in your head, and then for a short intervention, Barbara, you would like to directly comment on Boris? Okay, so Nora, maybe I just allow 2 sentences.
Thank you very much. I would like to say something to Boris and to all of you. What I realized is that political shareholders are changing very fast. And with the change of the shareholder, always the direction for education sector also changes. That makes it not easy. And in my opinion, we need a medium and long-term strategy and concept. That means a business plan behind it, with condensed, with learning condensed, with tasks, with deadlines, investments and responsibility. But as I said, it changes, a new mayor, new direction, a new minister, new direction, a new school leader. That's how it is. So to be really trustful in a system, it needs long distance goals. And that's actually what we are missing. And I'm fully on Boris' side. Actually, all of you are saying the things which I can just make. Yes, that's how it is.
But
Thank you.
Just if, Anja, if I can just briefly answer, Barbara, you're completely right. And as I said, there's a lack of strategic thinking with regards to the both national and wider goals within these nations. However, there is another, and I'm speaking from my own personal experience, there is a very large support for the raise of the quality of education within these nations. There has been very few countries in the world, and I can say that Croatia is one of them, where tens of thousands of people came to the streets for the educational reform, not against the educational reform. So it's such a bizarre concept. Now we are speaking about the inefficient educational systems, where people, general public, wants better education for their own children and like for young people themselves. However, there is a like lack of impetus and lack of pressure on politicians to make it a long-term goal. So my advice to all of the people, like Eastern from here, and also to the West, is to make that pressure on politicians.
Thank you. So Nora, now the floor is yours.
Thank you. I've nodded a lot because I agree with everybody. Yeah, and especially with what Boris said now. So I see this in Kosovo as well. There is a lack of vision. We have a lot of strategies because we also have a lot of support from donors to write strategies, but they end up somewhere. Nobody really has a vision where wants this country to go. So what is the Kosovo that we want? And according to that, we could also try to reform and see what kind of skills will be needed in the next 5 years. I know we cannot predict this because everything is developing very fast, especially now with digitalization, but still there are some trends that could be followed. But coming back to what was said from many of you, there's a lack of political will as well, because which government would take over to reform or to do such a risky step if they know beforehand that they cannot achieve it during a normal mandate of, let's say, 4 years, like it is in Kosovo. And this is why we really need to work all very close together and to enhance this pressure in order to have interventions in the education system. And I'm not talking about vocational education systems, but we need interventions really in these preschool programs that we have, because skills that companies need, they are developed from the beginning. And I think this is lacking not only in Kosovo, in the neighboring countries as well. And this is where, we should have, in Kosovo, it would be definitely our chamber to put some pressure and to advise the government. But on the other hand, we're just one of the many stakeholders. And this is what's needed. In regard to the question about EU, I agree with Barbara there. There's a lot of support already here. And especially in Kosovo, we have so many donors. Everybody wants to do something good for the country. But we also need to leave some responsibility and ownership to the locals, to the local companies who need to be encouraged to invest in their future staff, because most of them lack this readiness. They want to have things very fast, especially right now. So they cannot wait for this, for their people to be trained 9 months and 3 years and so on. They want to have them now. But on the other hand, they are not ready to pay for those services. So we have in Kosovo even training education providers which are private, and they have difficulties to partner up with companies that need staff. And it's really absurd if you analyze all this. We need so much more time to talk about all these difficulties. But you see, we have identified the problems, and there are, of course, solutions. And it's just that, as Barbara said, we need an action plan and to see until when what needs to be done. And sometimes even these regional objectives that have to be met as a Balkan region are good to put pressure on each and every government of the Western Balkan 6.
So thank you very much, Nora. And last but again, not least, Françeska, the floor is yours. And maybe you can also already pick up the question, because it was actually the question to you, whether there is a transparent job market in Albania, right? So maybe you can also refer to that one. And afterwards, I will give the floor again to our co-moderator, because there are some comments in the chat we would like to share with you too.
Thank you for the question. So if we would have transparency, not in Albania, but in all Western Balkan, we were not being participated in this conference. And I think that the lack of the job transparency in Albania is a huge problem, as it is in other countries of Western Balkan, and for this reason, a reform for the public administration has been undertaken. But what I see more among young people is the lack of trust that they have in the governments. So whatever the government might undertake, young people do not trust anymore in their action and that they will have concrete results. So at the day that we speak, we need more concrete results, and we need more role models also of persons that have already go to a path of a successful career in Albania or in Western Balkan countries without being part of this kind of system. And I highly agree with the other participants about the rule of law and the other problems raised, because the problem that we are addressing today, it's a problem that it is an intersectoral problem. So if we speak about the needed skills, we also speak about the education system, we also speak about the rule of law, and we also speak about the form that our governments work. And so on.
Thank you very much, Françeska. I hand over to Christian for the second round of questions and remarks from the audience.
Thank you very much, Anja. The debate continues also among our more than 100 people in the audience, and there's not too much of questions right now, but rather two statements I found interesting and would like to add. And one statement adds an aspect we have not so much touched upon so far, which is the question of motivation. And the viewer says, I would also add the negative impact of remittances for discouraging youth to take up jobs in domestic market. Like in any other immigration country, remittances raise the reservation wage for the youth. So also here a different kind of effect we have not talked about yet. And the second remark is also a very interesting and also moving example where somebody says that I think Albania also has a very politicized education system, which is also very corrupted. If you are a politician, if you know a powerful person, or if you can pay, you can get better or excellent marks. My cousin got depressed by seeing corrupted professors and decided to leave university and did not continue studying. So I think also an aspect which is relevant also for the other countries and not necessarily only for the one mentioned here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for these remarks from the audience. Actually, I would like to ask now also our panelists to pick up the question on politicization of the job market. The question we shifted a bit to later because of the next panel, and to have, to give maybe also some comments to the discussion of the next round. But I think, I would really be curious to get your insights and remarks on that one, and also on the effects of the remittances. So the question, or for me it would be indeed a question whether it is how we can link it also to the question of unemployment and youth unemployment. Is there a direct link? Is there really such a motivation not be motivated to be part of the real job market? I'm not sure, but I'm curious also to hear your answers on that one. And so the floor is yours. And this time I would like to start, okay. I would like to start the other way around and give the floor back to Françeska. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. There is a low motivation of young people to participate in the labor market and to take the courage to do something different, and maybe to invest their energy and to invest their capacity in a country where the rule of law is in lack, and much other aspect that doesn't work in the right aspect. But in the meanwhile, when we speak about higher rate of unemployment among young people, I think that there are some concrete action that might be undertaken. So in the moment that young people have finished their study, to be prepared for the labor market and its request. One of these action would be career guidance from the secondary school. So young people will be smoothly oriented through the needs of the labor market and further choose the relevant studies. And we have also mentioned the vocational education, and it was also mentioned among the questions that we took, which I find that is a bright opportunity for young people, not only in Albania, but in Western Balkan as well, to take a decent job and to be part of the labor market of the country. Because by taking into consideration the percentage of the young people that mostly decide to choose like economic or other studies, we will have a lack of professions for the most usually aspects like an electricians, etc., etc. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you also to Christian, who reminded me that we just have some minutes left to the end of this panel.